it's just like a trope that like I have seen a lot. Like, you know, you go to shows and there's like, man, I'm gonna come on Mosh retirement. It's like, what do you? No one gives a fuck. Like, do whatever you want to do. Like,
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure podcast. For anyone who is watching this, just wanted to give some housekeeping notes because you might be like, where are we, Spencer? What is this room? So this is one of the first of few podcasts that I'm doing in a brand new space. I just moved to a new house. So there's some establishing for shit that's going on the walls and lighting and everything. I almost want to compare it to, it's kind of like any local scene that has the go-to venue that shuts down and then there's like a couple gigs in between until you're finding the right place. This is kind of one of those in betweens, but this was a guest that I didn't want to, make anything special to like in the look side of things. I just really wanted to jump on a call with this person and chat with them because I think what they're doing with their content and just like their connection to hardcore, I think is very relevant. So it is a absolute pleasure to bring on the person who arguably is the decider of who should be in Mosh retirement and who shouldn't be. Stanley Sievers, dude, thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
hey, you know what? Thank you for asking me.
Absolutely. And extra kudos to the Terminator 2 hat that you are rocking right now. I am mad jealous because that's my favorite Terminator movie. And where did you scoop that up?
I got it on eBay actually. I'm always like looking for movie merch and stuff, but yeah, I knew. I was like, look, I'm gonna be on the podcast. I gotta bring some heat. I gotta bring some heat. I'm always wearing hats, so I gotta bring some heat. I gotta bring out something from my archives, you know.
What's the little bit on the brim there?
So it's Universal Studios. It's actually like from, I think it's from a ride, like the Terminator 2 ride, like back in
Oh,
the day.
okay.
But yeah, it's just Terminator 2, so it's pretty sick.
That is very okay.
It's also
What?
got it's got the Universal tag, which is pretty sweet.
Oh yeah, it's official. This is no bootleg
Yeah,
shit.
this is no bootleg type stuff.
I love that. What's your favorite quote from T2?
Um, Man, I don't know. I don't know if there's a quote, but I think maybe this is in T2. I don't know, but it's the part where Sarah Connor like goes up to the fence and then she sees like like the kid, like herself and the kids just get blown away by fire, and she's
Oh,
like,
and then she
"Ah."
turns into a skeleton.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not a quote, but like it's the funniest part. Like it's so good.
hmm
Um,
I
yeah, I
mean,
love that part.
"Hasta la vista, baby" is like a household thing that people say, and
Yeah.
that's from that movie. So that's pretty up there for sure. Um, I'm trying to. I also, to your point, it's not a quote, but it's a scene. I always think of when Arnold is like smiling and it's just like so uncomfortable to
Yes.
look at. He looks uncomfortable and it's uncomfortable to look at. But yeah, that movie is dope. Like I know this is a hardcore podcast and not a Terminator 2 podcast. Because I know I could easily talk to you about that. But yeah, Stanley, I'm very excited to have you on the pod. I'm sure a lot of people tuning into this have definitely seen one of your videos, one of your TikToks. And I think a goal of mine for this convo is to talk about content creation within the hardcore space, but having that come from a genuine place and being plugged into the culture and about it. Because there's definitely people on the flip side that use hardcore as a means to just like generate clicks and likes and all that, but they're not going to local shows. They haven't played in bands. So that's definitely a goal of mine selfishly for this podcast. But at the end of the day, like I also think you're a dope dude and I'm stoked to have you on the show as a part of our roster.
Man, I'm so happy you called me a dope dude. That just made me feel so good.
Dope dude needs to be on one of your
Yeah,
upcoming shirts. But before we chat about anything hardcore related, as you know, we have to check some bevs for the show. You're reaching for something, so
yeah,
you're all ready to go.
yeah. So I have a Mineragua here, which is this is my favorite sparkling water. It's either this or Topo Chico, or actually or Liquid Death. I like Liquid Death too, but I can't really ever find it around me. And like the corner store, like a block away from my house, always has Mineragua and um Topo Chico. So it's kind of like my go-to.
Nicaragua is not something that we have in Canada, unfortunately, but I'm very intrigued because I think that there is something to be said about drinking. I think the best beverage experience is drinking out of a glass, and
Absolutely.
that is what that is. And that's not flavored at all. That's just like regular sparkling water.
Nah, so it's made by Doritos. It's like the same company that makes like you would find you go to like a Mexican spot, like they have
Right.
like all those flavors. But yeah, it's in a bottle and it is like it's a very spicy water. It is like
Mm,
it's very strong, which is what I like. I
yeah.
want it to hurt, I want it to feel like I want it to feel grating as I, drink it down,
Mhm.
and it definitely does that for me.
It's really funny because I know, like, I'm a big Liquid Death head myself, and I know um, this is going way, way back in the podcast, but we had Styx, who's the VP of lifestyle marketing on the show, and he was saying that a lot of people like their sparkling water specifically because it's not as spicy. Like the CO2 amount isn't
Hmm.
as crazy, so you theoretically could down it. But yeah, like certain other sparkling waters or even Topo Chico, it's like I have to pace myself because if I don't, I'm just gonna be like belching, almost vomiting
Yeah,
if I
exactly.
push myself.
They have Topo Chico in Canada.
I actually have a little bit of grievance with them because the only spot that I was able to get it in a glass only orders them in like plastic bottles now, and I don't
Oh,
even want to
ew.
touch that with a 10 foot pole.
No, that's gross, dude. I don't touch
It's
that plastic shit.
yeah, it's a bev sin if anything.
Yeah, I agree. I can't be drinking something out of a plastic bottle.
Yeah.
You're not gonna find me sipping on some microplastic
Yeah.
like that.
No, sir. So beverage wise for me, special podcast in my opinion. So I want to bring a special bev. So this is a local craft soda company called Annex, and the flavor is
Whoa,
Saskatoon lemonade.
that's sick.
As because you're based in California, correct?
Hmm.
Do you know what a Saskatoon is?
No, I've been to Saskatoon though.
You've been to Saskatoon. Okay, even
Yeah.
better. So, so they have Saskatoon for the uneducated is a small little town in Saskatchewan, Canada. But Saskatoon berries, in my opinion, are like the goated berries of all time. If you've
Whoa,
ever had Saskatoon jam, it's like the only thing I want on toast at all times of the year.
that's
It's
cool. I
kind
gotta
of
check it
like if
out.
you combine blueberries taste wise, but also it's like you combine all the good things of blueberries, raspberries, and blackberries, but it's like it's very hard to explain, but it's hella good.
That's
Whenever you're
sick.
back up here, I'll make sure. Whenever is the first time that we get to link up, I'll make sure to bring some Saskatoon jam for you.
Yeah, I'm a big berry guy myself as well. I love some fruits and berries.
Hmm. So I'm gonna be checking that, and I am. Oh man, I clipped my nails just before this, and I'm just like struggling to get this out and ready to go.
There we go.
Oh, you got the bottle opener,
Yes,
everything.
sir.
All right, well, Stanley, thanks for coming on, dude. I'm really stoked to do this.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, dude, that is so good. Um, and also a little bit of a Calgary plug as well. So shout out to Annex. So Stanley, I don't know if you've checked out other episodes of this podcast or kind of know how the initial part of this show works, but any new guests, I like to get a little bit of context about how they just discovered hardcore, how they got into this whole, subculture that we all like, is second nature to us. So tell me like the first time that you were like discovering this and what put you on your path specifically.
Yeah, I mean, so I think like I started going to local shows when I was like maybe 13, 12 or 13. I didn't really have a lot of friends at my school, but I did have a few. The only friends I had were older than me, and they were in like local bands. But they weren't in like hardcore bands. They were in just kind of like local like alt rock bands, like just like beep beep boop doop, like just weird like
Right.
weird local band stuff, But at the time, I was like, this is so cool. So I go to their shows, and like every now and then, I vividly remember like bands would jump on these local shows, like a touring band would last minute. I think like one of the first like hardcore bands I saw that was like a touring band was Go It Alone. Go It Alone jumped on a show at this like YMCA, and at the time I was pretty much exclusively listening to like Korn and like Slipknot and like and Disturbed,
Right.
and I was like, I pretty much everything was like, this is heavy, but this is cool, but it doesn't really sound like Korn or like whatever. Like I was like very
Right.
much like I compared everything to Korn,
Yeah.
and so this
Where's
band.
the dreads, man?
Exactly, dude. I was like, I don't know, dude. Korn is pretty sick. System of a Down rocks. Like this stuff is like fine, I guess. But then I saw them live, and I was like, holy shit! Like they were fast, and then they were like heavy, and they were super tight. And I remember getting like their CD, and I would play it in my Walkman because I'm 31.
Yep.
Um, and I'd play it in my Walkman, and I would just like at first I didn't get it, and I'd be like, oh man, but I want to really get this, so I just kept listening to it over and over again, and then I
Right.
oh, okay, now I get it. And then I think around that time is when I first saw like I think my first big like concert. I saw like Unearth and A Life Once Lost and Nora, and that's like more like metalcore. But at the time, I don't know how old you are, but at the time, like metal and hardcore were kind of like the same. Like Bleeding Through is like a hardcore band, sort of,
Right.
like
Yeah. Unearth,
like Trans-
definitely, like early Unearth stuff. It's like, oh, these are just like standard hardcore breakdowns today.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So I was doing that, and then I think like from there I transitioned into like as bands came through and were touring, like I got to know people that were more like into cool stuff, and they started like putting me on to things. And then I would go. I had one friend that would drive me to shows that were like hours away, and I was like 15 or 16, and he was like, probably like late 20s or so. I don't know, or maybe mid 20s, but he was just super cool. Like he would take me and anyone that wanted to go to a show like 2 hours away, and then he would drive us back. I'd get home at like 2 a.m. and my parents like didn't care at all. They were my parents are very much just like do whatever you want as long as you're not doing drugs. So at the time, I was straight edge at the time, so they were like that kind of like alleviated any like tensions for them. They're like, okay, as long as he's not doing drugs, like it's
Right.
fine, whatever.
Right.
He's like hanging out with these like weirdos, like that's fine, but
Mhm.
whatever. I didn't know what I was doing. I would wear like a comeback kid t-shirt, and then I'd have like a pair of jeans on, and I just like before I'd go to a show, I'd just like duct tape an upside down cross on my fucking jeans, and I'd be like yes, dude, like this is what it's all about, bro. Like fucking yes. Like I would just be like so. I didn't know what I was doing. I think a lot of people when you first start getting into something, you're like, I don't know what's going on, but I don't have any friends. Like these people are weird, and no one gave
Right.
a shit.
Yeah.
And I think I also got to know this guy. His name was Anthony Pointer, and he was like a little bit older, but he was like a vegan straight edge guy
Mhm.
that he was kind of like dumpster diving and like all this stuff that I'd never heard of before. I was like, what do you mean? Like, and he was straight edge, and like I don't know, he like put me onto like zines and all this stuff. So I kind of got into more like I listened to bands like Tragedy and like Coalesce and like bands like that, like from him. Um, and then ended up sort of meeting through local shows, like starting hardcore bands that weren't very good. Like I met like some good friends that we started a band called Dead Icons together, and they were older than me, like 4 years older than me, and so they put me on to a lot of bands, um, and they would like give me their old shirts and stuff.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of how it started, I think. And I went to a lot of shows like around. I'm from Kentucky originally, so I went to a lot of shows in like Cincinnati, like Indiana, Nashville, like everywhere. And I think especially like in Cincinnati, I'd go to like see Suffocate Faster all the time. I don't know if you've ever heard of that band. Yeah, they're sick. But yeah, like I just Louisville, I'd go to Louisville a lot. Um, but that's kind of how it started for me, just like being weird and like going to see shows. Like I'd go to a show, like a local show, like a hardcore band would play, a guy with like a theremin machine would be like wow 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 wow, like with like after that, and like and then I would like then I'd go outside and like I'd see somebody selling like I don't know if this is what it's like for you, like, but it was like early, like no, there was like no really like internet type shit.
Mm.
So you just go to a show and there'd be someone selling like medieval jewelry, and then like a hardcore band would play. There's like a theremin guy, maybe there's like a rapper. It was like so weird, like where I'm from, because like it's Kentucky, like I was in a
Right.
big city, but
Sure. And
still,
just so I understand the timeline correctly, this is all like pre Knock Loose. Like when you think of when people hear Kentucky or Louisville or any of those places now, that band helped like not like put it. Well, they did put that scene on the map for a lot of places because a lot of people are like, why the fuck would I
yeah.
go to Kentucky? Like the amount of people that probably thought like I will never go to anything hardcore related in Kentucky, and now it's the total flip where everyone's like planning their LDB stuff throughout the year.
Mhm.
So it's the all that, but all this stuff for you was all happening pre
Oh
like
yeah, Knocked
all that,
Loose is like Knocked Loose. I think they started being a band right when my band stopped doing stuff. Like
right?
probably like I don't know exactly. Like I don't know them personally, but I've like talked with some of them here and there just on the internet. Like I really like their band and I like what they've done for Kentucky. And that was always like my goal to do with my band, except we just like effed everything up and like 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 we just made like every wrong decision you could make as a band, and like we didn't know, dude. Like I think a lot of people that are from scenes that have like bands that have already been there
Mm,
benefit from knowledge being passed down. Meanwhile, like we were the first hardcore band from Lexington, I think, and we were just like, we don't know what we're doing. Like
right?
we're just gonna do whatever, and like, yeah, we'll get this guy to design some shirts who designs like metalcore shirts for like this
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense, but like we just had no concept of branding or anything, and why would we? So yeah, this is all pre Knock Loose and I think Knock Loose,
You
they
can
did
go,
it the
man.
right way.
Yeah,
And they like yeah,
I do think that. Oh, hang on one second.
sure.
Thank you. Sorry, I was getting batteries dropped off, and I realized that there's a lock on this door, and it's happened before where it's swung open and it's like locked on itself. But luckily, it's one of those locks that I can just like you know I
Yeah.
just did this on the podcast. Whoops.
Damn, dude.
Whoops. Um, but what I was trying to say, it sounds like for you, it was like a lot of people that kind of like saw the interest in you and helped like kind of like walk you through some of the like I'm going to take you to shows, I'm going to show you these bands, I'm going to like show you these things that are part of the culture in addition to the music. And I think
Mhm.
that's like so crucial. It was so crucial for me as well as like when I was getting into the shit almost 10 years ago. And I like to bring it up and remind people that like, just because we have things like the internet now, we're not like, everyone's got Spotify or Apple Podcasts and not Walkmans. Like, I had one of those myself as well. But at the same time, it's like there is something to be said about you being a quote unquote old head and seeing a kid who's like just starting to come to shows and seeing that spark in them and like starting a band with them or like,
Mhm.
just like bringing, like, if you see that they're just being dumb and standing right where the mosh pit is happening and they are like, 90 pounds, like pulling them up on stage so they can get a different vantage point. Like, whatever like situation that you find yourself where it's like, oh, I can act and maybe give this person a good experience is like that speaks volumes because it's so apparent when people come on the podcast and they talk about their early experiences. There's always like a couple things that to that person then probably just seemed like it's whatever, but it really goes a long way.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, I said, I didn't really have any friends my age. All my friends were like 4 or 5 years older than me.
Yeah.
And like, you would just go to shows and then we'd be like, dude, look at that guy. Like he's got padlocks in his ears and he's moshing super hard. What's that band shirt he's wearing? Like
Yeah,
Hatebreed, whoa,
absolutely.
and you're like,
Yeah,
what the hell is that? And then
yeah.
you go home and you're like, Hatebreed. You're like, what the heck is this? And, and then like,
Yeah.
yeah, and then I don't know. I do think that the one thing that I think helped me a lot is when I would go like to Best Buy and like buy a CD. This sounds like the oldest conversation of all time. Like I
Dude,
sound
I
like
turned
fucking ancient
30
right
in
now.
January, so I'm right
Okay, you're in the
behind
same
you.
bit.
So
Okay.
yeah,
I feel like I sound fucking ancient right now, but it's like, dude, this was like 3 years ago. Like everyone needs to calm down.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, if I buy like a record, I'd buy like a CD, like a Terror CD from Best Buy, and I'm like on the way home, just be like reading all the lyrics and trying to like memorize them as much as I can. But like, you don't
hmm
really get that now. Like you can still find the lyrics, but it's like getting it in your hand is like really different. Or like ordering
right,
something from like a merch catalog or whatever.
yeah.
It's, I don't know, it's different.
Yeah, and I feel like, a lot of people can be nostalgic and think like, "Oh, these were the glory days," but like it's so apparent now that like even though the culture has changed as far as like discovering new music, you're not just like going to a Best Buy or an HMV and just choosing something off of the for fans of or whatever. Like
Hmm.
I feel like the rate at which you can discover new music is just at an all-time high. Obviously, there's tons of great bands that get suggested and some that just don't hit. But I do think that I don't, there is, I think the awareness has built, but I do agree that it's like the galvanization of like getting someone to like be a lifer, so to speak,
Hmm.
not just like, oh, I saw like the Tsunami House Show video on the internet and I want to come check it out. Like, there are certain tried and true things that will make someone like, okay, like I'm gonna base, it's that meme. It's like, all right, I'm gonna base my entire
Yeah,
personality
this is
and
it for me
lifestyle
now.
about this for the next 20 years.
Yeah, this is it for me now. I think like and there was a time in my life when I was like, this is it. Like when I was touring, I was like, all I'm gonna do, I'm gonna tour till I'm 30, and then I'm gonna manage bands or I'm gonna book bands. Like, and that was like my plan. And like obviously that didn't happen, but like
Right.
that and it was my life. And granted, that was the only thing that I had found like accepted by was like this weird like community,
hmm
and I was like angry like all the time. You know what I mean? Like I just like I don't know, like I'm a adult man and like, I'm emotionally stunted probably like at the time. Like, we like I don't know, we don't always know how to like express our emotions, and at the time like just because of the way I grew up, like I was just super angry and like didn't really know have an outlet for it.
hmm
And I was like, oh, here's this outlet. I can go like yell, like that guy's like yelling about the same thing that I am.
Right.
And then yeah, I think I don't even know where I was going with that, but
No,
it was
I
going
think
somewhere.
I think it's really like finding a way to express yourself in a way that you just wouldn't normally be able to, and like, you're not going to be like doing any of that shit at like a work event or like,
Hmm.
things like that. I think hardcore for me is about like owning that you are angry about something and then like this is how you can like make a change, or this is how you
Hmm.
can like take that fuel and like put it into something positive. And like there's tons of bands that are just like ultra negative about stuff, and I feel like you need a scale that you can
Hmm.
kind of like figure out where you fall into. But I think for the most people listening to this podcast, as well as anyone that like calls themselves self a hardcore kid, I think it's like, for me, it's given me like a direction and, if anything, confidence to be able to like stand up to shit I don't agree with, or like
Hmm.
do shit that like, you know, everyone else in my life would be like, that's stupid, that's a waste of time, you can't do that. Cause like I truly believe that without hardcore, I wouldn't have had the confidence to hit up someone that I saw like a funny TikTok and be like, hey, like let's, do a podcast together, or any of the other like bigger guests that I've had here on the show. So if anything, it just has helped, put sails in my ship and, course correct.
Oh yeah. No, I agree, man. I think that like I hardcore gave me a lot of confidence, especially like when I first started touring, because like I think I was very awkward, like as a person. And we like would book the first tour we ever did, like we booked through MySpace. And the reason why I started doing the tour, first of all, that's a funny sentence, like booking it through MySpace. Like once again, and a straight up like that's like a fossilized sentence that you would
Right.
like scrape the dust off of in like an Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah.
But like but I would do so like that what you were saying is like a hardcore gave me the confidence to do things that other people would be like, this is a bad idea or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was like I was right as I was getting done with high school, I was like looking at colleges and stuff, and I was like, man, this just doesn't really feel right. And then my friends like asked me like, hey, we want to start a band, but like the specific goal of this band is to tour. Like we're going to engineer our lives in such a way that we can tour. Like we'll do whatever job or like set up our living situation in such a way where like we can tour.
Mm.
And that's like what we're going to dedicate to like 100%. And I was like, I'm in. Like I just didn't even think about it. I was like, I'm doing it. And then I was like, hey, mom and dad, like my parents were divorced at the time, so I had to like go to each person separately. But like, hey, I'm not gonna go to college. Like I'm just gonna like tour in this band. And I think at first my dad like was he did not get it, which is like any parent would be scared, right? You know,
Right.
like this kid's like gonna go out doing what? My mom was like, she was scared, but I think she was like very supportive. But it gave me the confidence. And then as we're on tour, every day I feel like I got to meet new people. I was in a new city and we coming up with all these like new situations, like your van breaks down or you're like staying at some weird person's house, and it like you start to understand who you are as a person by being thrown into all these insane situations, and you're like, oh, okay, like I don't really like the way I reacted to that, or I didn't really like the way that this person was, or like
Right.
I really liked the way that this person was, or I really liked this. And it started like getting out of my bubble like really helped me, I think, develop like as a person. And
Mm.
also just interpersonally, like talking to people. Like every day I'd be selling merch and like talking to like 20 to 30 people every day. Like how many things in your life are you going to do where you meet 20 to 30 people, new people every single day, you know, like
Yeah. 20 to
nothing.
30 people that either you have some form of connection with. You're not like
Yeah,
just slinging coffees at a Starbucks or whatever, where it's
right.
like the only fucking thing is you want coffee and I'm conditioned by my job to give it to you or whatever it
Right.
is. Like,
Yeah.
there might be certain scenarios where, you work at like, a skate shop or a camera store, so there's like something there, but that's all like transactional. And I guess you could argue, you're slinging merch, that's transactional as well. But like, I think we can all agree that like doing that versus like this business, it's like that's way more community
Mhm.
focused. And like we all know the money from that merch is just gonna go fill the tank to
Yeah.
get to the next show. And it's
I'm
just that whole
negative.
thing.
I'm negative big time
I'm
hardcore.
negative.
I'm like I am in the red so hard. Like yeah.
You mentioned Dead Icons as far as a band that you were in, but another aha that we realized before we were getting going is you played in a band called Call to Preserve as well. Which
Yeah.
for me, being a face down kid growing up, I was like, that is crazy. Um, can you talk to me a little bit about your time in that band?
Yeah, so Dead Icons did a tour, and then, like, we played a show with Gravemaker, that's shout out Canada. Um
Gravemaker, sorry to cut you off, was my very first, like I was mentioning before, just like close my eyes and pick, like I picked a Gravemaker CD. Is like, I think it's Lost at Sea
mhm, with the
with the
face on the front?
with the face on the front, and my
Yeah,
mom was like concerned.
yeah.
She's like,
What
"What is
is
this
this
thing you're
shit?
bringing home?" But it's wild too now because shout out to Cole Young. Cole.
Also, shout out to Cole Young from me.
Oh, you fuck with Cole Young?
I fuck with Cole Young, yeah, we
That's
because we
so
did a bunch of
sick.
stuff with Gravemaker over time, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, Cole was like, back when this podcast was not over Zoom and the pandemic hadn't even hit yet, like he was. Jordan, can you pull up what episode he was? I want to say it was like episode 11, but he is like one of my favorite people from Calgary. He's like super talented when it comes to not only like guitar but also his like beats that he does, and yeah, getting to talk to him about Grave. So I love that you're bringing up Gravemaker. That's
Yeah,
that's a big plus for me as a Canadian.
Gravemaker is great, I mean, we played a show with them, like, we randomly jumped on a show with them, like, we didn't have an agent or anything at the time, we didn't even have a label, like, and Bailey was like, "Hey, do you want me to like book you guys? Like, I have like a run of a week in Florida that you can do with Call the Preserve." And we were like, "Oh yes." He's like, "Yeah, I can get you like $100 a night." And we're like, "We fucking made it! Like $100 a night! Oh my god, dude! Like we are killing it!" Like And so we did the tour. And so we met them and everything, and then like a little while later, like I just stayed in touch with them, and then
Hmm.
like they asked me if I wanted to do this. The first time I filled in for them was uh it was a it was a Donnybrook, Call the Preserve, Vania, Stand United tour.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's stacked.
Yeah. So I did it was like a almost I think it was like a 3 week or maybe a full US.
Hmm.
But that was the first one I did with Call the Preserve, and like um at the time it was like I was a fill-in, like the drummer was a fill-in, and then the singer and guitarist were like original members.
Got you.
Which also like one of my best friends now used to play drums in Seven Star and Call the Preserve, and he like lives out here. He's an actor now as well.
Mm.
But yeah, so I did the tour. Did that tour with Call the Preserve, which like Donnybrook was like one of my favorite bands because I was like big into eulogy stuff like
Right.
early on. And then did that tour, and then I started doing a couple other ones. I did like a full US with them and some Vania or something. Oh, you did another tour with Vania. And then we did like an album release for like their most recent Called Reserves, like recent like album, like recent as in like 2012, Uh,
Recent as of 10 years ago.
yeah, recent as of like over a decade, basically. But yeah, so I did that I was like switching off Dead Icons and Called Reserve tours, and then like on my downtime, I would work at Jimmy John's, like picking up shifts. Like my whole band survived from working at Jimmy John's. We would just pick up people's shifts. And actually, have you heard of Emerosa?
Oh, yes, Emerald, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
So we grew up with they're also from Lexington. We grew up with them.
Okay.
And our both of our bands basically survived by like when they would go on tour, we would pick up all of their shifts at Jimmy John's. And then when we would go on tour, they would pick up all of our shifts at Jimmy John's. So
So
we would like,
those bands
yeah,
could not both be on tour at the same time because that Jimmy John's would be vacant.
yeah. And the thing is like no one wanted to work at that Jimmy. Like all that we just worked with a bunch of just like electric, like DMT festival like people. They were just like, wow, and they would always just call out all the time. And so we would get like I could get home from tour and work like 50 hours a week for 2 weeks and then leave again. Like and our manager was just like, you guys can as you can pick up shifts, I'll give you whatever you can. He was very supportive of us.
Damn.
But literally everyone in our band worked at Jimmy John's. It was insane.
That is crazy. Yeah. Jordan dropped in the doc that Cole Young was episode 5.
Wow.
And we're over 210 at this point when
That's
this
wild.
podcast drops. So he's a very real one for coming on very, very early. So shout out to Cole Young and shout out to Gravemaker. That's so sick that you know them.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that we, I'm loving the vibes of this convo, but I want to make sure that we hit on all the stuff when it comes to your shit. So, we've talked a lot about like discovering hardcore, you playing in bands and all this stuff. Talk to me about when like the idea of because you're like you've got your hands in a lot of shit. Like you're doing comedy stuff, you're an actor, you're a filmmaker, direct you got like a profile and you've got a long you have a long LinkedIn title, I will say
Yeah.
that. So like when did the initial like have you always been doing stuff growing up or was there a certain point like being the goofy dude on tour? Like tell me about some of those things.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like I it's hard to say. I think I started to find out like being like funny, it was like a thing like on tour. And then so after my band stopped doing stuff, it was kind of like abruptly, and I was like a really big like it was really depressing for me. Like I spent like a year basically like I went from working at Jimmy John's to like just do this tour thing into like now I'm just like working at Jimmy John's, I live in my mom's basement. Literally, I'm playing Call of Duty like every night till like 5 a.m. And I'm like so sad. And I literally had no idea what I was gonna do. I was like, I can't like do this like forever, you know, like I I thought I was gonna be doing this band, like this was my dream, you know. Oh
Right.
man, this band was my dream. And so I after about a year, I was like, I gotta do something. So I started like I was interested in filmmaking, and I made a couple like short films like in Lexington, and I basically used all the actors that exist there. And then I was like, I gotta move somewhere. So I moved to Chicago, and then I wasn't really interested in like acting or like comedy stuff per se. I was really interested in like directing because I would like go like before I moved from Kentucky, like after I did the band, I would like randomly PA on certain things here. Like I would go and like work on like I had a friend who put me on who was like older than me, and he worked at an ad agency, and he would like hire me as like a PA here and there even though I didn't know what I was doing.
Hmm.
So I was like, oh wait, if I just learn how to do what that guy with like that camera was doing, like I don't have to go to school like college. Like I was doing everything I could to avoid that, and I was like, sure, I'll do that. So moved to Chicago, and I started taking improv classes because I just wanted to meet actors, and I just wanted to like have fun. And so I took classes at Second City and IO Chicago, which is like IO is a place where you like a lot of like SNL folks like kind of, you know, got started. And then Annoyance Chicago, which is kind of like the hardcore venue of comedy theaters like in Chicago. And I
Wait,
was there
wait.
for,
What do you mean hardcore venue of comedy?
yeah, so
Break that
like
down for me.
yeah, so I think like Annoyance Theater is like a place where you would see like improv shows, stand-up shows, plays, but they were like alt. Like they're not
Sure.
they're not always like audience friendly. It's like people are just kind of like it's not something where you could like a tourist is gonna walk off the street necessarily to go see. Like they might go see a Second City show, you know, like Annoyance show is more like I don't know, like just it's not that they're just kind of like raunchy, I guess, or not necessarily raunchy in like a sexual way, but just like
Like anything can happen kind of
yeah, and it
thing.
was, like,
Okay.
very much, like, people, like, working things out. A lot of times, like, people would just go and, like, fuck around at Annoyance, and then, like, they would still be doing things at other theaters, but, like, Annoyance would be, like, the place where you can go and, like the way they teach comedy and, like, improv is very much, like, creating characters and, like, creating, like, this idea of, like, a character and, like, holding strong to the character and then filtering everything through that, like, point of view,
Hmm.
which is, like, what I have which is what I feel like I learned the most about, like, doing comedy-wise because, like, that's what made sense to me, so it's like, okay, like, this is, like, getting into the minutia of, like, comedy, like, improv stuff, but, like
Dude, we're here for it.
okay, so, like,
Share all
let's
the Nusha.
okay, so, alright, so let's say, like, if you're doing improv and you're, like, walking into a scene, obviously, you have no idea what's happening.
Hmm.
So an easy way to, like, get started, and it's kind of like cheat code almost, which, like, people that are, like when you get good at as you doing a lot is, like, I'm just gonna pick a thing. Like, the thing is, like, maybe, like, my thing is, like, my guy, like, my whoever my guy is, like, he, like, really wants to watch, like, Terminator. And I don't, like, reveal that up front, and so someone's like, "Oh, you're having a good day?" And you're like, "Oh, you know, it's, like, not that great. It could be better," you know, like and you just kind of, like and then so maybe I just know that about myself that I just wanna watch Terminator. Maybe I'll say it at some point, but, like, knowing that, like, my character wants to watch Terminator will inform, like, other things. So,
Mm.
okay, cool, like, I don't wanna go out to a movie because, like, I wanna stay in or, like, whatever, and it's like, "Oh, like, have you seen this movie?" Like, "Nah, I don't know, it's just not, like, enough action, like, there's not enough, like, trucks, you know, whatever, like, there's not enough, like, trucks and stuff like that, like, going off." And so it's like, over time, you're like, "Wait, I think this guy's just, like, talking about Terminator." Like,
Right.
like, whole
So
personality is
you
based
kind of just like like you're kind of like peeling an orange that
yeah.
doesn't come off in one just give. You don't
Yeah,
give
like
it all away at once.
exactly. And then, like, some other things you can do where you can pick, like, an emotion. So, like, whatever they say, I'm gonna be sad about it, and
Mm.
then I'm gonna go from there. So, like, "Oh, we're going to Disneyland." I'm like, "Man, what the fuck?" You know, like so it's like these are, like, cheat codes and things, so you learn how to create characters, like, really easily,
Sure.
and then I started doing, like, solo character work, which is, like, what you would do to audition for SNL, which, like, a lot of people get to audition to SNL in Chicago. I never did,
Mm.
but basically, like, you do, like, characters that are, like, you know, 1 to 2 minutes, you're on stage by yourself, and you're like, yeah, this is a guy who blank, or you just start doing it, and you.
Like,
I was
sorry,
trying to,
would you say that, or would they throw a character at you and you have to just do it on the spot?
so you would write them and perform them. So
Okay.
for example, like some characters that I used to do that I don't perform live very much anymore, but like one guy, like a character is like, I would just say like, this is a guy who sounds like NASCAR when he's watching NASCAR, and he's just like, and he's just like some like redneck guy or whatever. But it's like stupid shit like that, or like I had another character that was like a guy that he was like getting kicked out of like an aquarium because he just like was pissed that like all the kids were getting to touch like the what are those what are those things called? They're like slippery in the water.
Uh,
Manatees or something. He was like, all these yeah, he's like, all these kids are touching the manatees and they're not coming over to me. And he's like getting mad and like it's like the stuff like that. I would write characters like that, perform them live, like perfect them a lot, and then do like these like showcases.
mhm.
Um, so that's kind of where I got started doing that. I never did the stand up really, but I guess I consider that stand like you're still standing up there and like, I've done characters with like a microphone, a lot of times you're not doing them with a microphone.
Right.
But so I did improv, did that, and then at the same time I was like making a lot of like comedy videos, like sketch videos with like friends and whatnot there,
Yeah.
and just like writing a lot. And I was there for like 4 years, so I was doing that a lot, and then moved to New York. My wife and I like met, and then we moved to New York like a year later, and so I continued to do that there, like perform and like shoot stuff.
Mhm.
And it literally never occurred to me to make anything making fun of hardcore. And I
Yeah,
think
but
that like,
like it's really cool for me to hear all this backstory and thought when it comes to it because I totally understand now how all the stuff that you're doing with the content you're doing now is like, yeah, these are all just characters that
mhm,
we would meet at a show or like have been that person at a show.
for sure,
Um, I
absolutely,
I think like the one the one and we'll get into the whole like understanding the culture and respecting that in a bit here, but like I think the one piece that I'm like, oh, like Stanley gets it was your harassing the photographer after the show. Because as someone that films, hardcore bands, and like Jordan, who produces the show, like just got back from filming this fest in Minneapolis. It's like, when are you gonna post it?
mhm,
When are you gonna post? And I'm like sitting on so much shit. And granted, there are so many people that are so, understanding and patient, but like the impatient person I've dealt with far too many times.
yeah,
And some of the things that you're like, as soon as it was like trying to leave and then grabbing the keys, I was like,
yeah,
oh my gosh, no one's ever done that, but I felt hostage in that way
yeah.
so many
Well,
times.
they're like
So
punishing you, like, and here's the thing, like that comes from like I have felt that before. Like you're like, man, I know there's a picture of me that's really cool, and I really want them to post it, but like I'm not gonna ask them. Like maybe I will, and then you're like, well, I'm not gonna ask them. That would be like super annoying.
right.
And it's like sometimes it's just like I'm like, what if this person like just took this too far? Like that would be like pretty funny if they took it
Right.
too far.
Yeah. Can
Um,
I tell you one serendipitous hardcore photo story, and then
yeah.
we'll jump back to this. So, as someone that grew, you mentioned, the dude, you wearing the comeback kid shirt and with the jeans and the upside down cross that with the duct tape. So, like being from Winnipeg, I grew up on Comeback Kid. That's like my hometown hero band. It's been really cool now to like meet those guys and play shows with them. And now it's like we're just friends. And I've been able to have 4 members of that band now on the podcast. So it's like,
That's cool.
yeah. So the very first, this is like years ago. This is in like 2018. Um, I Scoped had just started, and I was filming them, and novice Spencer filming. I ran my memory card up, and it was like
Hmm.
during Wake the Dead, last song, big, hometown, everyone's going nuts. So I was kind of bummed, but then I was like, well, I could either just stand here and be bummed during, arguably the most legendary Comeback Kid song ever, or I could just go off and just have a blast. So there was a moment where I I put my camera down and I was stage diving, and then there's like, everyone like put their hands up for like the last chorus, and there was this shot that got captured, and it just was constantly used on their Instagram feeds all the time, and everyone would always send it to me like, yeah, I know that's me. And then when COVID happened, there was a brewery in Winnipeg that did this like benefit beer kind of in collaboration with Comeback Kid to help raise money for a lot of Winnipeg venues. And the photo that they used was that. And when I had Goose on the podcast, I'll see if I have it back here. So for all the video people, I've told this story before, but that's me.
Oh, that's sick.
And then there's
That
there's Goose in the back. So when I
rules.
had Goose on the podcast, I showed him the can, and he was like, "That's you." So we had this funny moment. Fast forward, my band Endgame played and opened for Comeback Kid, and it was like the exact same thing. I was like, I need to stage dive to Wake the Dead, not to because of this thing. It was just like I just handed my camera off, and it was like the same. Like we almost recreated the photo like 3 or 4 years later.
That's cool.
So yeah, I'll give plugs to Joey who snapped the first pic, and then my buddy Cole who snapped the other. But to quickly transition back, it is very funny where there's almost a bit of an expectation of like, I saw your flash pop when I did this cool spin
Hmm.
kick move or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah. So you do this stuff in Chicago. You meet your now wife and you move to New York, and now you're in California. So like you've been around and moved to a lot of hot places that have people that are like doing different filmmaking or
Hmm.
creative careers. So was that move to the West Coast like for that specifically, or were there other things at play?
Yeah. So we were in New York. We were in New York for 2 years, and then COVID happened. And then,
Mm.
like, my wife lost her job. Like, we couldn't live on what I made alone, so we moved to Richmond, Virginia, actually,
Oh,
for two
okay.
years. My wife's from Richmond, so
Hmm.
she's aware of like hardcore, and like she has been to shows and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but so we lived in Richmond for 2 years, and then we just like kind of got bored, and then we moved out here because we didn't want to move back to New York because also it was like pretty insane, like cost wise there, like also because during COVID and like especially even now too, it's crazy. Like just rents and everything are super high. So we moved out here because we always wanted to live out here. And like at this point, like most of my friends in the world like live here. Like all my comedy friends from Chicago have moved here. Like a lot of my New York friends have moved here. Like it's just crazy. So and it's just better for like writing and like acting stuff, like directing.
Right.
It's just like everyone I've ever worked with is here, and you can make stuff anywhere, but you're not really around other people that can be like, hey, like you should do this thing with me because you live here, whatever. This kind of like the Blink 182 situation.
Hmm.
But that couldn't have happened anywhere else if I didn't live in LA.
Right. Yeah. And that's definitely a talking point that we'll get to soon on this interview. But um, going back to what you said, like there there wasn't like initial thought to like, oh, let me goof on the things within hardcore that like anyone who's been in it for long enough knows about. And as I said at the very beginning of this podcast, like my goal is to a selfish goal of mine is like to have it where it's like, hey, you could be a like as corny as it sounds, a content creator within the scene, but to do so and have it be genuine, like you need to like do other things as far as
Hmm.
just being a hardcore person. It's the same for me doing this podcast or thinking about doing anything outside of like, normal band stuff. So when at what point, you're doing all these like skits with friends, like, that you're like, oh, like maybe I do something related to like that because like when did that idea cross your mind or did you hesitate at all to even start doing that?
Yeah, so I definitely hesitated for a while. Like I'd thought about it, maybe like I thought about it kind of like maybe like a year ago. Um, but I didn't really do it until I don't know, maybe like a couple, like not that long after I moved to LA because I would basically I have a friend, like my friend Will, shout out to Will Woods. he and I like make stuff a lot of together, like in Chicago and now here. But so we'll meet up and like I'll film some stuff for him, he'll film some stuff for me, and, like help each other out, like
Sure.
notes and whatnot.
Yeah.
But so I knew I was meeting up with him to film some stuff, and I had some characters ready. And then I was like, I had this idea for the first like Mosh retirement guy because like it's just like a trope that like I have seen a lot. Like you go to shows and there's like, man, I'm gonna come on Mosh retirement. It's like, what do you? No one gives a fuck. Like do whatever you want to do. Like
Yeah.
why is this is such like why does this need to be announced?
Right.
Like it's so funny. Like and so I was like, I'm just gonna do this character because like I knew that I was like, okay, I knew that I'll make like the 100 people I know from hardcore laugh like on my Instagram. Like
Sure.
I didn't really know, I didn't expect it to like go crazy.
Hmm.
I literally just thought I was like, oh, this will be funny for like the 100 people that I
Yeah,
know.
like for the homies. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just gonna make one for the homies because I've been writing other characters and stuff,
Hmm.
and then it like just went crazy, like and it's on TikTok and like Twitter and like Instagram and like it blew up, and then I was like, oh shit, like I got to do more of this stuff. Like I didn't realize that there was like a want for people to clown on like hardcore because I think maybe because like when I was into it, I don't think like at the time. I mean, you're probably old enough to you're old. We're the same age basically. So like
Yeah.
it wasn't always like very cool to like be self-aware and like clown on things in hardcore, like
Right.
you would have like Rick to Life on a horse and you're like, oh, that's funny. But it's like you couldn't like make fun of like, you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
you have like, dude, I'm just like I'm going back. Like Rick to Life on a horse is like an old shit like reference, but like there's stuff like that that was like funny, but you wouldn't have anything that was like more self-aware, like ripping on this kind of stuff. And
Hmm.
I think I hesitated for a long time because I was like, oh, people are gonna think I'm like corny by doing this because I saw things that were corny. Like I saw people doing like corny stuff about it. And like, I don't know. I don't want to be like, I don't want someone to like think that I'm corny or like, and I'm sure people out there do. I mean, they tell me they do, so it's fine. But like, I know they exist,
Right. Right.
um, like I didn't want to come off as like disingenuous or whatever.
Hmm.
And then eventually I just stopped giving a shit and I was like, I think this is funny. I'm gonna make this. And then that kind of like one video started it. And then I was like, oh, I already know how to make videos. I know how to edit stuff. I know like how to create characters and how to like write things and pace things out that it's like interesting to watch.
Right.
So I've been doing it for like 10, 7 years or whatever. Like, so I'm just gonna keep doing this. And yeah, that's kind of like why I got into it. And I was like, I would make shit that was like the photographer one was actually one that I was like, I don't know if anyone will get this. Like this seems like very niche to me that I think this is funny. And that one proved I was like, oh shit, like people actually want to see this like super weird niche, like making fun of this stuff. So it
Right.
kind of just like that gave me permission to like,
Yeah, because anyone in like, who goes to like, I'll just use a very easy trope, like who goes to raves, they'd be
mhm,
like, I don't understand this. But I feel like there are certain that's the thing for me. Like I get like random comments every once in a while being like, I could really do without like these bev check intros on the podcast. And I'm like, I feel like that as a niche has like helped separate us from any other like hardcore podcast because
yeah,
it's like, oh, scoped exposure, yeah, bev check and hardcore. It's like bevs and bands, like that's kind of like the combo. Um, and at the end of the day, it's like it's fucking 5 minutes of me maybe like talking about something or like it just breaks the ice. But to get away from that because I'll go forever. Um, I think there's a genuine I think your hesitancy is the right move because hardcore is a thing as we all know is like it means so much to so many people on like a deep level and a lot
mhm,
of people get like gatekeepy in like like in a way that I understand where it's like I don't want you to do something from an ill-intentioned place and I think doing anything whether it's there's people that don't like the fact that there's their bands are getting documented. They don't like, they think podcasting is like trying to like remove zine culture or anything like that. And I think this culture has just like evolved and needs to evolve with the times
mhm,
and just like because new people are it's undeniable that people are finding out about hardcore through things like TikTok, through things like this podcast or anything. There need but all those things for people to fill those content funnels needs to be done with understanding and grace. And I think
Mhm.
that there's, you know, I think the thing that for me as an outsider before we like started chatting to set this up is that when I saw you post photos at Sound and Fury, I was like, oh, okay, this guy's a part of the culture because
Mhm.
it would be very easy. It would be very easy to read things online or listen to podcasts and then go make stuff and then not go to shows. Um, and like I've had people on where it's like they can talk something and then, it's like I get DMs from people like, I've never seen this person at the show. But like I just felt like they're like the niches that you hit on, I'm like, oh yeah, like this guy has read, has been on like goes to shows, understands these things, and like I've run into people where it's like I think that, but then I see by their actions that they're not actually about it. They would
Mhm.
rather spend, their weekend making a video about hardcore and like borderline shitting on bands than actually just go to a dope festival that's happening in their town. And that to me
Yeah.
is like a big tell that you're not about, you're very, very fake. And people in hardcore sniff that shit out very, very quickly.
Yeah. And I think that's what my hesitancy was. It was like, man, I don't want like I love this. I love like the culture and like I don't want anyone to think that I'm like shitting on their thing or whatever. At the same time, I think it's like hilarious. I think like things about hardcore, like I'm like 30, I'm like a 30-year-old dude, like 31, like I don't know, like I just think things that when I was like early 20s, I would be like, you can't make fun of this. You can't make fun of this. And
Right,
now I'm like 30, I'm like, well, of course you can make fun. Like,
right.
of course you can make fun of it. Like, if you know what you're talking about, like I do agree. It's like, I don't know that I'm aware of like any other people that make content like that. I just like, I probably don't engage in TikTok in like the way that a lot of people might. Like, my TikTok is all just like democratic socialist like stuff and like fucking, and then like I'll see hardcore stuff too, but it's a lot of just like that and like psychology type stuff or like
Sure.
therapist type shit. But that to say, like I don't really feel like it's calculated. It's like, oh yeah, of course I'm gonna go to Sound and Fury. Like I live in LA now. I've never lived here. Like I've always wanted to go to Sound and Fury. Like
Mhm.
it was always a dream of mine to play there or like whatever. And like, I just wanted to go. And it was like it wasn't like a yeah, it just didn't it felt like natural, of course. Like it's not even something I like registered as like,
Yeah.
whatever.
And
Um
and the other thing too that I will say is that, like, like, you were just going, like, "I'm just going as a hardcore person." It's not like,
yeah,
"I'm going to, like I'm gonna make these videos, like, in between bands." Like,
yeah.
clearly, like, the sus alert of doing something like that is interesting. And I have that same issue where it's like, you know like, I constantly think about how I can, like, add things for scope, but then at the same time, like, "Man, I'm going to a fest in, like, a couple weeks, like, maybe I should just, like, fucking chill."
Mhm.
If I have no involvement and, like, instead of trying to do something. But, like, there are times where it's like, yeah, it would be cool if we did, like, a little, like, Mosh report and just, like, interview people at the show. Like, I've listened to some of those through other people, and it's cool. But from what I saw from you, it's like, yeah, I'm going here as a person to support this community, not to gain anything out of it.
Yeah. And I like that was the first time that like I had like maybe 15 or 20 people come up and like ask to take pictures and stuff with me, which I was like my friends that I was with, I was like, this is crazy. Like I did
Right.
not expect this to like happen,
Where
you
people
know?
like, Which band do you play?" And you're like, "I don't play any of
I
this
don't play in
band."
any band. Yeah, no, they would like I'll be walking by someone and they would just like they would like say a line. I'm like, what the fuck? And then they're like, really like you're and they're like, hey man, like really, and they're like, hey, are you the guy that whatever? I'm like, yeah, I'm the guy that does that.
Right.
But like I was so I mean,
Do people call you the TikTok hardcore guy? Do people call you the Mosh retirement guy? What's the common title you get?
I think like the Mosh retirement guy is bigger now.
Mhm.
TikTok hardcore guy is that as well. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think those two are the ones that I get a lot. But I like at Sound and Fury, I had a great time. Like I watched the bands that I wanted to watch, and then like I really enjoyed like meeting people face to face that really liked and talking with people that liked what I was doing and saying like how much like it made them laugh or meant to them, you know?
Right.
Like I'll get messages from people that'll be like, man, like my mom literally has like cancer right now, and like this is your video is like the first time I've laughed in like 2 weeks, you know? And it's like, holy shit, man, like that's like really cool. Like, and I like,
Mm.
you know, I can't do that any other way, you know? Like I know I can do that, and I know I can make people feel good and like feel seen, and like they can laugh at themselves or whatever. And that was the first time I met people in person that like that. And I wasn't certainly going to be like, hey, well, blah, blah, blah. It's whatever, you know, and like I'm not like making videos in between shit, because like it'd be different if maybe the fest is like, hey, we want you to come and make some videos or whatever, or like whatever.
Totally.
And like
Totally.
that would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
different.
Hmm.
But it wasn't. And you know, I'm not gonna like, and you know, I was there to watch bands and like hang out. It's like
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to like
Yeah.
get some shirts for bands that I wanted. I bought a shirt, it was too small, you know, and then the line was too long. I couldn't go back and get another. But it was like too awkward to go back up and be like, hey, can I change this out for bigger size? It's like I'm
Right.
just gonna take this shirt home.
Yeah.
But like I just wanted to like go and hang out, which is like
Hmm.
what I would go. I mean, I go to shows in LA, like not as much as I would like, but quite, you know, a lot, you know.
Hmm.
Um, Primarily because I just found out how to find out about shows in LA. So
Gotcha. But I think the thing that we're both agreeing on here is that like you strip all of the like all of the non how do I unword this? Because I don't want to say fluff or non-essential, because I do think that it is critical. But if hardcore like has a Terminator 2 level event where like it's catastrophic, like it's just at it where it's all it is shows and bands, being willing to be like, yeah, like I'm just like I'm down just to go and hang out, and I'm still going to be a
mhm,
part of this, versus like, oh, I don't get to like have a social media following off of this thing. Like even if I wanted to shut down like Scope tomorrow, like it wouldn't mean that I wouldn't still be going to shows or playing in bands. Like that's
yeah,
just in my DNA. And I think there's a lot of people that again look at it in a way to benefit versus like, what am I actually doing to maybe like add to the community? And if anything, comedy is like is almost like an untapped area where like you said, like being self-aware of like everyone's been like, yo, I got the sixth song, and then everyone's like, bro, that's the riff from this band.
yes, exactly. Like
It's
that's
like,
how
no,
that
no, no,
happens.
no, no. Like literally I had a moment like I was reviewing something for a new demo I'm writing. I'm like, did I unintentionally steal this from this band? And I was like, well, I'm not gonna say what riff or what band it is, but if people come to me, I'll be like, yeah,
Yeah,
I can see the comparisons there.
yeah. Just move it from the 4 to the 5, and then you're good. Like,
Right, right.
yeah,
So, like talk like you mentioned as far as like, okay, people are really responding to it. You doing a little bit more like niches. Like, were there any that you were like, I'm really gonna like put it out there and do something like this? Or have you started to kind of like, I think we're 4 Mosh retirement TikToks,
yeah.
like part 4 at this point, but like, where is your mind when like, how do you like come up with these ideas? Is it when you're like at a show and you see something, you're like, oh, why is that not like something that I can do? Like, what comes to you when you're thinking about things?
Yeah, I think like a lot of the ones that I'm doing now, I have wrote maybe like when I first did the first Mosh retirement video and it went really well. I was like, oh, and I just wrote a premise for like 15 or like 20 different, not even Mosh retirement, just different things.
Hmm.
So I'm still sort of going through those, and like I've written new ones along the way, but like um I think a lot of it is like stuff that it just feels like it exists like in my brain, like from going to shows, and then it's like, yeah, maybe I'll go to shows and see something or whatever. A lot of times it's like just seeing things online too, like the way people like respond and like message boards or whatever, like the different kinds of people. And like
Hmm.
a lot of it is honestly pulled from just like growing up and like different
Yeah,
things
your
that
experience.
yeah, my experience. And yeah, so now it's like I have to like I try and be a little bit more intentional and like, okay, like when I'm writing, like for example, like when I'm writing like a new like Mosh retirement guy, like maybe I'll have like, I don't know, I'll have like 70% of it written like before I go do it, and then like I'll just improvise like some stuff too.
Hmm.
Um, so that's like the way that I feel like it helps me keep things like fresh, because it's like if it's fun for me to say on the day, then I know that it's like coming from like my experience in my brain. It's not something that I've like fully like written out.
Right.
So I just try and like do things that are like fun. Like, okay, this would be funny. Like I think this idea is funny. Like in the most recent Mosh retirement video, I was like talking about it just kept having to do things like sending people back in time, and I just think that's like so funny, like sending someone back in time. And so I just kept doing it on the day. I was like, all right, I got another one where I'm gonna send like another thing about sending someone back in time. And like
Right.
I don't know, like just things like that are really funny to me. Like the idea, like Pangea is funny to me, like fucking different. I don't know why these things are funny to me, but I just like that. It's just like I want for, and then on the day, I'm like, I think this is just where I'm at. It's like making references to things going back in time.
Right. What
Um,
what what is maybe the one line that people wouldn't expect that was improvised, but like really stuck and is like a
oh
constant
man,
quoted thing? But you're like, I literally thought of this on the spot.
yeah. So the Benjamin Buttons line was written ahead of time, but like I I laughed like the first take we did it, which is the take that I kept.
Right.
I'm trying to think of like Benjamin Buttons is like a big one that people like. Um, Man, what's like, oh yeah, the 14, I don't care if you're 14 or 41 is like a line that people say back, like
Right.
which I that was like improvised. Like I think that's funny, like
Hmm.
just flipping the numbers around, like I don't know, stupid shit like that is funny to me. Um, Man, what other lines are improvised? It's hard to say. Um, oh yeah, so I think that the one in the third one where I'm talking about how like I passed by a mirror and like there's no reflection, and I haven't thought about that since, like that, like I think that I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do, and then like I improvise like the actually what it became, or like a lot
Sure.
of times like I'll think about like the bands that I would like, the shows that I was at, like
Hmm.
quote or whatever. But yeah, I don't know, it's hard. Like I can't remember specifically which ones would be improvised, but um it's
I
interesting because I will improvise one, and then sometimes I don't keep them. Like I'll have stuff on the cutting room floor, like
sure.
maybe
Yeah,
30
you're
seconds
trying.
of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to keep the best of the best.
Yeah.
Something else that I'm just realizing, there is certain band nods. I think you were talking shit on Breaking Benjamin in one of them, which like I'm literally looking at my Halo 2 poster and I've like talked so much about how like all the bands a part of that soundtrack, Breaking Benjamin, Hoobastank,
Yeah.
like we're so, like and I like I'll die on a hill. I think Diary of Jane is a banger album, but I understand shit talking them, and I thought that was very, very funny.
Yeah.
But there isn't another thing to add to. I think your genuineness of all this is like you're not like, oh, let me like name drop all like the quote unquote like hype bands that are happening right now. Like you're maybe making like specific nods to like older bands, but you're not like saying ingrown pain of truth and like candy within one sentence, if you know what I
Yeah.
mean. Is
Yeah. And
that
like I think
intentional or like was that like did that not even cross your mind?
I think it for some reason feels like gross. I don't know why. Like I can't
Mhm.
explain it. I just like it feels, I think what you're saying, being like, oh, look at all these new cool bands. If anything, I'm like doing the opposite. I'm like saying bands that like maybe like not that many people are listening to right now,
Mhm.
but it's like bands that maybe I listen to, or like, whatever. But I don't know why. I guess like it doesn't feel like, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like as genuine, especially for that character. And then maybe like other stuff, maybe I would mention like newer bands, but I don't know. I think that it's easy. Like I think it's also like for bands like Terror and Hatebreed and like Madball, these bands that are like legacy bands,
Mhm.
um, it's easier to like to mention them in a video or like not like nod out to them because like they're so established, or as opposed to like I don't it doesn't seem like I'm like trying to name drop or anything like that.
Right.
And then I think that there are times when I would mention like I mentioned like Buried Alive in like the most recent video, just like a band that I love, and like people are like, "Whoa, you mean Buried Alive?" or whatever. And it's like I wasn't trying to name drop a band that like is cool and like niche. I was just name dropping a band that I like. And
Right.
maybe like I guess as like these, maybe if I would name drop newer bands, but I also don't necessarily like it's also like I don't really know people in those bands very well, like and
Mhm.
or at all. So I don't want to like necessarily put the spotlight on them or something when that I don't really know them. It's easier for me to do that for bands that are just so like established that it's like, they don't they're not really affected by that. Like,
Yeah.
and so it's like, it would be a bigger thing if I mentioned like some like smaller band or whatever. I don't know. I guess I'm not really doing a good job of explaining it. I just know that like it feels kind of weird.
No, no, I totally agree, and I feel like yeah, it's like it's not like it's not like anytime someone mentions Madball in like any kind of context, whether it's a comedy skit or a podcast, like Hoya gets a ping on his phone and he's like, "Oh, what's
Right.
what's happening here?" But like, it's a little bit different when you're like, I feel like it's just trying too hard like if you're doing that with like certain bands, it like in a podcast where you're talking about like up and coming bands, yeah, that totally makes sense. But if you're like, I feel like unless you, like, did some kind of character that was, like, around this, like, "Oh, I know new bands," but you're saying Knocked Loose when it's like everyone knows who that band is. Like, "Have
Yeah.
you heard of Turnstile?" So, I don't know. I'm not trying to, like, write characters for you, but because 'cause I'm sure
Okay.
you
Have
have
you heard of Turnstile?
pulls
It's
out the pen and
oh
paper.
shit. Yeah.
But I do think that there are certain people that are just so established and so just more known that it makes sense to be able to do that. And like Buried Alive is like to some that might be niche, but like again, for people in the culture that do their homework, they know the bands like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think I just don't like yeah, like you're saying, like he's not gonna get like someone from Throwdown isn't gonna get like a ping on their phone. They might, but like and they have, which is like they will like people I've talked to people in bands and they're like, this is really funny or whatever.
Right.
But it's not really the same as like me like being like, oh, I whatever, Mosh retirement for some like newer hardcore band. And it's like, yeah, I guess it works like tonally, but I don't know. I just don't like it
Mhm.
doesn't I also don't know that it like really works for that character. Um, but I just don't want to like I've seen videos of people being like, dude, if you're not going to a Knocked Loose, a Pain of Truth show, or a Candy show, then like, what are you doing, bro? You're not like, and it's like people that are like, did you just look up like the three hardcore bands that people like talk about and then just like mention them? Like that's what that sounds like.
Right. Right.
So it's like I don't want to like I'm just gonna like name bands that are coming up to me like in the ether and I it's not that I also wear like I wore like a Frozen Soul shirt, which is like a band that I love. It's like I don't know them
Great.
personally.
Great band. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
love that
love
band.
that band. I just wore their shirt in a video and people are like, obviously they knew about it and like we were talking and stuff, but like that kind of stuff, it's like that feels like natural. Like I'll wear a shirt, but I
Yeah.
don't know why. I just
Yeah.
don't really think about that.
Yeah, and that was like something else that I found really interesting too is that even before you were tapping into any of this, like you were still doing skits and like even some of your like your films were like you're wearing a Gate Creeper shirt, you're wearing
Hmm.
these things. So it's like I never downplay the power of like a hardcore shirt because it's like it's as weird as it sounds, it is kinda like a uniform when you see that in, like, any kind of thing, like, you know, any like, so many people share it out the ass when it's like, "Oh, so and so was wearing a X band shirt, and it was in the background of, like, The Tonight Show," and it's just, like,
Right.
all these
Yeah.
things, because we get giddy about that, but, like, I think
Ben
it's
Affleck wore a Triple B shirt. Oh my
yeah,
god.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you know, but like Ben Affleck wears a lot of like Bridge 9 X Sully's
Oh yeah,
brand
Bridge 9, that's what
stuff.
it was. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, and I only know that because Chris, who runs Bridge 9, he came on another podcast that I was doing at the time. I've never actually talked to him about that, but like he's always resharing that, and I just think that is like so funny.
Yeah.
It the whole world of like celebrity and hardcore, which now, because bless my wife, she's like a big, like, she always watches the Kardashians, and I think I saw
Mine
a
too.
tweet.
You're looking, dude. I'm
Yeah, we're
my we
cut from the
got my
same
wife's
crop.
she always be watching the Kardashians. I watch it
Yeah,
too.
but I'm like, are we gonna get a Kardashians episode when Blink is on tour with Turnstile? And like,
Yeah,
that's very, very, very strange. Which
yeah.
brings me to a piece that, in the midst of us like constantly rescheduling this and finding the right time, originally we were going to do this podcast prior to this Blink announcement, and
Mhm.
you being a part of that. So talk to me about that. Like, I think it would be easy for people to think, oh, he made all these TikTok hardcore TikToks and then he got in a Blink thing. But I think it's more, I would assume that it's more within your film connections that even cross your radar. Is that right or is that wrong?
It's funny because it's almost exactly what you the first thing. So I'll explain what happened. So basically, I
Sure.
made the first Mosh retirement video, and then I saw like, because I don't know if on your scoped exposure page it'll show you like priority notifications for Instagram, where it's like when you get a certain number of followers, it'll show you like priority. So it'll be like verified accounts or accounts with like over 10,000 followers or whatever.
Oh, okay.
So I
Yeah.
saw a a like from like a blue check mark come through, and I was like, oh, that name looks familiar. And it was this guy Brandon Dermer, who's the guy that directed the Blink video.
Hmm.
And I was already aware of him because we have mutual friends. He's from Chicago. He directed lots of like comedy stuff. He's directed like a bunch of stuff for like Diplo and like a lot of music videos and shit. So he
Hmm.
liked it. So I followed him because like, fuck, I realize I'm not following this guy. Like I really want to see what he's making now. And he
Hmm.
followed me back. And so we're talking. And so we're trying to meet up for like weeks because he lives like nearby to like get coffee.
Yeah.
And then we meet up, and we're just hanging out, like talking. And he's like, I think I have this thing that you might be good for. Like, I'm not sure if it's going to happen or not yet, but I'll put you in for it. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And people say stuff like that all the time, like in
Sure.
LA. You
Sure.
never know. Like, you're like, okay, cool. Like, I don't
Is
get my
like
hopes
a
up.
sex scene, or like what's this
Yeah, like I
thing
don't
that I
get my
might
hopes
be
up for
good for?
anything. Like until I'm like doing it on the day, like I don't really get my hopes up for stuff like that.
Totally.
But then
Yeah.
like one day, like on a Sunday, he was like, "Are you free on Tuesday?" And I was like, "Yeah," like in the afternoon. I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Okay, I'm gonna put you up for this thing, and then I'll let you know, like if you get it, if the client approves you." Now I know the client is like Blink-182, so they approved
So
me.
sorry, but so when he's texting you on Sunday, it's like, oh, by the way, this is for Blink 182.
He didn't tell me what it was.
Oh, okay.
Um,
So you're just like, it could be a whatever, like,
yeah, I mean, he said something when we meet up. He said something about how he was like working on something for Blink-182 or like some, but we had talked about a bunch of different stuff, so I
okay.
didn't really know like what it was.
Yeah. But
So
you're like, it could be a music video, it could be
could be like a
something.
scene from a short or whatever, like something, like a little. So he it was like his idea for that. From my understanding, is his idea. He like wrote the idea for that commercial and like pitched it to them,
Hmm.
and then like they were looking for people that looked like construction workers or whatever, and he was like, this guy would be like perfect. And I think also just like we got along, and like um he's into like the same kind of like hardcore metal stuff, and like
Hmm.
so he's like, I put you in for this thing, I get approved by it, and then I go and I'm going and I park my car, and I can't go into the place yet, the building. It just looks like a regular like office building.
Hmm.
Um, and then they come out, all the people, the crew arrive. Like I was super early. I'm like perpetually early, like chronically early to everything. So
Sure.
I'm like way too early, like sitting there with like my wardrobe or whatever. And then they come and they're getting like the situation set up. And at this point, like I've signed an NDA, so I know it's a Blink video,
Hmm.
but I can't tell anyone.
Yeah,
Um,
until it's out.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we shoot my part, and then I need to use the bathroom, and I go inside, and actually you need to use the bathroom before we do it. So I go inside and I'm like, oh shit, this is like Travis Barker's studio. Like I'm like in his like studio where his like drums are and all his bikes and like his Blink stuff on the wall. Like holy shit. So I'm like,
Oh.
I use the bathroom, I wash my hands, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like this is crazy, dude. Like he's not there, like no one's there, but it's just like
Right.
people that work for him, presumably. So I go
But it's
outside, we shoot
like
the
his DNA and fingerprints are all over
all
this.
over it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So then I go outside, shoot my thing, and then I get like makeup in my eye. So I'm like, God, I gotta go back inside and like get this out of my eye. So I gotta get I have to like annoyingly get someone to escort me back into the studio to use the bathroom. And I go inside, and now there's like a lot of people in there. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like I gotta go and I use the bathroom and I come out and I walk turn the corner and like boom, Travis Barker, Mark Hoppus is there, and then Tom DeLonge is like sitting in a chair like 8 feet from my 8 feet to my left.
What?
Yeah, so I'm like, I walk out and they're over there. Like Travis and Mark are maybe like 10 feet to my right. Tom's
Sure.
like 10 feet to my left. And I was like, I have to, like, I need to get out of here. I can't linger, but I also can't walk too fast because, like, I want to, like, just soak this
I
up.
need to savor this
I
moment.
need to, like, soak this up. I have maybe about like 60 seconds of like walking from here to the door.
I have to
I can just, like,
accidentally drop my pen and be like, "Oh
yeah.
shit." And then I
I
have
was
to
like,
trip.
and I can't like look at them for too long because otherwise it's like clearly I'm like being like fan type behavior in a
Right.
situation that's like not professional, like it.
Right.
So I'm like, oh man. So I'm like walking slow, but like very conscious about like I got to keep moving, but I'm walking slow.
Mhm.
And then like they clearly didn't want people in there that weren't supposed to be in there at that time
Sure.
because obviously they're like super like mega stars.
Yeah.
And so I leave and I like as I'm leaving, I look back one more time. I'm like, I just gotta take another look.
I got
And I
to take
look
a
and I see like
snapshot with my eyes.
yeah, and I guess they were shooting like after my scene, they were shooting like the last little bit in the commercial where they like are there,
Yeah.
because I think they shot it in his studio. So that's like that's my experience with that. And then um yeah, and then it came out. Like I couldn't say anything about it until it came out. But it was directly
That
because
is
of that first
wild.
Mosh retirement TikTok.
Okay, so
But I will say, like, I was only able to do it well because I had spent so much time like acting and like improvising and stuff.
yes.
Like it wasn't like a thing where I was like handed something and it's like whatever. Like I still had to learn. I still had to be like comfortable and know how to like act and like say a
Right.
line different ways and whatever.
Yeah.
Like I've taken like I've taken acting classes, I've taken improv classes, like I was comfortable being there. So I don't think that like he might have I think he was honestly surprised that was like knew how to do that. Because they're like, holy shit, like that's really funny. I'm like, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I appreciate you correcting the record there because I think it's anyone on the outside. It's so easy to just think like, oh, this guy just made a TikTok and then he's in the Blink 182 commercial. But it's like anyone that does anything um of like extreme scale has put in hours, days, if not years of their life, like getting to that point to have that like quote unquote shot or that opportunity.
mhm.
And it's not, and it sounds like it's really funny how like, making a hardcore TikTok got you connected to the person that did that. And, it seems like it paid off to have some makeup in your eye to at least be in the
Dude,
same
yeah,
breathing
it was very
apparatus of
serendipitous. I was like, holy
some
shit,
actual goats. So
yeah, for sure. It was crazy. I mean, yeah, like they don't see like you don't see like, oh, I've done like hundreds of improv shows to like nobody. I've taken classes and you know what I mean, like
mhm,
acting classes and whatever. Like you don't see that.
mhm.
Like it could have gone horribly. Like my take could have been so bad that they didn't include it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, absolutely. It could have been like, oh, I shot this, but then like it never came out.
I was like terrible like at acting. Like it didn't came out. Like my line read was like terrible. That happens all the time. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Have you ever worked a construction job?
no, never.
It's like, yeah, I guess like, the mustache and the
Tattoos and
yeah.
like in shape kind of, I guess, like
Did
I
you
look
meet
like I could do
anyone
it.
else who was in that commercial aside from Blink? Like any
Mm-mm.
other? I
I
guess
met like
yeah.
the two guys that were like construction guys behind me, like in
Hmm.
the shot, but I didn't meet like anyone else besides like the crew members.
That's sick.
They were all in different locations, so yeah.
Are you allowed to say what you got compensated for that?
I can't say.
I hope it's Blink tickets.
I you know what? Like that would be great. I'm hoping for like when the time comes where it's in LA, like I think maybe the director and I were talking, like we're gonna try and see what we can do because he like
Right.
obviously has connections and stuff.
You
But
you just gotta show up in the high vis. You're like, "Yo, I'm in
yeah,
the vid. I'm in the
yeah,
vid."
yeah. So I think that like we'll see. I mean, also like I'm not gonna pay. I can't. I'm not gonna pay like $300, 400 for that $1,000 a ticket to go see it. Like I would love to see them, but I think it would be like more. I would just wait and see like if he can get me in, which would be
Yeah.
cool. But if not, like what it is, what it is. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of great, mosh clips of people in PPE, that you would see
Yeah,
on 8x6 or anything like that.
yeah.
Um, so going back to, like, the characters and some of those things, is there anything that you have on the docket that you would either want to, like, and I totally respect, like, if you're like, "I want to, like, hold that close to my chest until it comes out," but is there any, like, certain characters that you're thinking of, new ideas that are, like, either in production or you're just like, "This is definitely something that I'm gonna do," because I think there's just so many tropes that I know even you and I could just brainstorm on
Hmm.
for hours, but I don't know if there's any specific that you're like, "This is in the chamber, is about to fire."
Yeah. So I have like I have one. There's two things I want to do. So one is like I have a character that I've been trying to do for months, but I just like I keep every time I go to do it, I keep forgetting that I have to like get certain props ahead of time. So I want to do like the guy whose band is going like on tour, and it's like he's got like a his lanyard has like 3 dates on it, and they're like within like an hour away, like each one. He's like, nah, we're going out for a month, dude. Like
Right.
a month of
World tour,
time.
and I'm just touring my state.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's gonna be a month-long tour, and there's 3 days. And
right.
he's like, "No, man, like, it's we're renting a van and all this shit." It's like but because I've met like, I grew up in, like, my scene, there were, like, people in, like, this metalcore band, like, I'm not gonna say what it was. It wasn't Emerosa, it was another band that's, like, now defunct or whatever, but they would always be like, "We're going on tour," and they'd, like, show up to local shows with, like, their lanyards, like, that were they made. It's like, those are supposed to be given to you, like, when you're on a tour, like, they just the people that made the tour, like, give those to you, like, you don't
Right.
make them yourselves,
Right,
Like,
right.
there's no point in making one for yourself for, like, a tour that's gonna have, like, 10 people at each show, like there no one is checking to see if you're, like, able to go where you're supposed to go, like,
Right.
that's the
There's
whole
no, like, band access areas, like,
yeah, at the
this little
VFW
back
hall,
room
like
is just where you store the drums and the amps, bro, like
yeah. It's like there's guys like that, and then same, like, as some people at heart I've, like, just run into that, like, back in the
Mhm.
like, where people would be like that. I just think it's really funny because it's, like, at the core, that person, like, really wants to do that, like, they at the core of everything funny, there's always, like, in my like, what I try and do, there's always something serious, like, there's, like that character has a want, like, they want like something, like this, like the person that wants to has like the tour, maybe and they're like, yeah, we're going on tour. It's like obviously they clearly desperately want to do that. Like,
Mhm.
but they're just like going about it in the most like roundabout way, like the most like
Yeah, it's,
misguided
like,
way.
ultra
Like,
fancy.
yeah, and it's like
Mhm.
same with like the Mosh retirement guy. It's like clearly the guy like wants to be like important and like special, and it's like he's like name dropping all this stuff, but then it's like you'll get like little bits here and there that he has like a terrible life, and like like it's like the only way that that character made sense is if he has like a terrible life that he's like neglecting, and like
Mm.
same with like the photography guy. It's like clearly that person, like it's very important to them to have that picture. Like there's for
To have
whatever
that new
reason,
profile pic.
yeah, like for
Yeah.
whatever reason, like there are things going on in their life that's like something very important, and like there's like
Sure.
a core of like emotional truth to like most good like comedy, in my opinion, or at least the comedy that I like.
Mhm.
Which is like what I try and do. Like everything I do, like I'm like this is me getting very into like the minute details, but like I try and they're always like a core of like what like this person is like a real person down. Like maybe they're acting crazy or whatever, but they clearly want something real. Like
Right.
as everyone does. Like
Mhm.
sometimes people act crazy or like they act embarrassing or say something stupid at the wrong time or whatever. But like that's just life. I think that like just taking it to the extreme with like a character is part of the fun of it.
Mhm. No, I'm really intrigued by a lot of this because yeah, it like boils down to like I can write something that's just like it's got goofs and gaffs, but like I think you breaking it down even more, it's like it almost like I start to feel bad for like the mosh retirement guy because he's
Totally.
like,
Totally.
I know that he wants to mosh, but I feel and he wants to be seen as a
Cool
mosh
guy,
return
like,
as a
yeah.
cool guy or whatever. So, no, I feel like that, and I think honestly, going about it that way versus like what is like what's the most outlandish thing that I can see shows the the good from the great when it comes to that. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of your stuff has been very thought out, whether it's improv or not. But I think again, you wouldn't be able to improv some of those lines without the years of experience that you clearly have.
Yeah. I was also gonna say too, I think that, like, you were talking about people that make things that seem disingenuous, and, like, it's like, okay, well, it would be very easy for someone to just be like, "Oh, look at me, I'm moshing. Oh, yo, yo, yo. Oh, I like yelling music." Like, that type of content, it's like, cool,
Hmm.
but, like, I'm not really like, I don't really have an interest in doing that. I have an interest in, like, I like characters and telling a story, even if it's, like, for a minute, there's always, like,
Hmm.
something in there, like, the guy got divorced or whatever. It's like, there's something in there that's like, I can't whatever. But I wanted to drop one more thing. So I'm like, you're asking me about other things I'm working on. So I'm working on like a short film, like a 10-ish minute, like maybe 10 to 15, like Mosh retirement guy, like mockumentary. So like the guy, he's like, I'm probably gonna shoot it here, like, I don't know, in a few months. I'm just kind of like working out the script with a couple friends and everything. But like, and basically, it's like the guy, he's like been court ordered into Mosh retirement. And this is like kind of the premise at this point. He's like been court ordered into Mosh retirement, but his like favorite band is doing a reunion show. So he like
Oh,
has to like
I understand the
he
dilemma.
has to like right his wrongs in order to like and in order to be able to mosh at this show. Like and he's like
It's
not allowed to
so
mosh.
funny.
So he has to go and like talk to the people that he's like fucked up or put in the hospital and
Right.
whatnot, and like read and like hear testimonials and stuff. Like,
Right. He's got
so
to
it's
put out
kind of,
a very long Twitter thread
yeah,
about,
like a notes
owning up
app,
to
like,
his notes app.
yeah, like, he used to put out a notes app, like, I understand, I've heard people, like, that kinda shit.
Right.
But it's like, it also, you were saying you feel bad for, like, people, like,
Hmm.
definitely in that, like, I'm, like, hinting on, like, you would feel, like, bad for the guy, like, which a lot of the stuff I write, like, in general is, like, people that are, like, at their core, like, just you feel bad for them if you really knew it was, like, going on, like, or very sad, like, people, like, maybe they're being assholes or, like, stupid or, like, cringy or whatever, but it's like,
Hmm.
there and one thing, like, that you learn, like, that I learned from, like, comedy, like, improv is, like, if you keep asking, like, why, you
Hmm.
get to, like, a really interesting place, like, why does this guy, like, you start a stupid thing, like, why does this guy think it's like, why does he care about, like, getting this profile picture? Like, why is that important? Well, why does he think that's important? Well, why
Hmm.
does he think that's important? It's like, okay, eventually you get down to like,
The
oh,
root
because
of
he's
it.
like really
Yeah.
sad, he doesn't have any friends, or like, like he wants to like, he just, yeah. So like, I think that's part of it is like you keep asking like questions like why, and then you get to the core of like what is this person's deal.
Hmm. I love the fact that there's like a short film in the works to be doing this. I would selfishly love to see a second um photographer videographer confrontation of some kind. I don't know if that's on your docket.
Oh, I have an idea for like kind of like a horror short film almost, like a guy like follows home a photographer from like a show, and he's like, "You need to get that photo now." Like he's like, "You're gonna edit that photo in front of me. You're gonna pull up Lightroom. You're gonna pull up Photoshop, and you're gonna edit it now
Here's my
with like a
Dropbox
with a
link.
gun." And he's like, "You're gonna do it now." Like, and just like I don't
They
know
get to
that
the
I just
image, it's like, what do you mean I'm cropped out?
no, it's got to be that's wrong. That's wrong.
You need a
There's another
wider
one on there.
lens.
Yeah,
Here's
scroll
a
on the
two
little thing.
millimeter lens. It's like so wide.
Yeah. That's like I have like ideas for stuff like that that like I want to do. I just like it takes a lot of time to like make like a short as opposed to like a video, it takes a lot of time to make like a short film. So
Right.
we'll see. I don't know. I think
Hmm.
I'd like to make it eventually. And now that I know that people really want good content that's like made well for hardcore, then it makes me be like, oh cool, like I can work on that. Like
Yeah.
um
So I feel like one of the questions that like it's kind of that classic thing where it's like you make something that works and then you feel trapped to a degree as a creative where you're like like it might be fun initially, but then you're like, oh man, am I gonna turn out like a fifth Mosh
Mhm.
retirement? Like, are you in that mindset where you're like, oh, am I just gonna become that person, or are you like, no, like I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna scratch this itch, but at the same time, I'm gonna still write like like films and do stuff that is totally outside of the hardcore world.
Yeah, no, that's like the second part is definitely the way I feel like I'm like I think like now I'm in the space where, like every time I go like to shoot some videos, like usually I'll come to like make like I'll make like 3 videos at once.
Mhm.
Then I'll just I'll just change shirts and like stuff like in between.
Dude,
So
I've done multiple podcasts on one day, and it's like during our break, I'm like
yeah,
changing the shirt. So I
it's
I
just
know the
like
struggle.
economical time wise. Like I'm already there. Let's like do these 3. But
Right.
now I'm at the point where like, okay, cool. Like I have a lot of people that are interested in like hardcore stuff, the comedy stuff, but they also like the kind of like comedy that I'm making. So I can also do other things as well. And like I can still scratch the itch with like hardcore stuff. I'm not gonna like not do that,
Hmm.
but I can like fold it in. So it's like if I go make some videos, like maybe I'll make like one hardcore video, one like other like for every like I'll make like a hardcore video and then another like character that I like, you know. And it's I think a
Hmm.
lot of the people that are into this stuff too are also into a lot of the same kind of comedy that I like as well. So
Hmm.
it's not going to be like so out, it's not going to be so out the fucking left field that someone's not going to like what I'm making, you know.
Right.
Like I think a lot of the people, like a lot of my friends like the same shows that I do and like the same kind of comedy and comedians that I do. So I think that like people will be receptive to that. Like, you know, right. I've just been making mostly hardcore stuff since then because I'm like, okay, like you sometimes I've learned that like when like there's usually in like entertainment, like I look at it like as the staples like easy button. Like the easy button is never there. And so
Yes.
you're just like hitting constant buttons. And
Right.
then it's like, okay, cool. Like sometimes you hit a button and it turns into the easy button. You're like, okay, cool. I need to like hit this button a few times, like just to like keep hitting the button for a little bit. And then I
Mhm.
can kind of like, now that I know the button's still there, I can start like doing other stuff. Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
I think if I could give a quick a similar mindset for me is like there's definitely like certain things where it's like if I have Isaac from Knocked Loose on the podcast, obviously I'm stoked to talk to him, but I know that episode will do super well. But
mhm,
like, there are people that selfishly I want to talk to where it's like, even if they play in a huge band, they're not like that typical heavy music artist like interview person.
yeah,
And that's like a big thing where I mentioned I've done 4 Comeback Kid episodes. There's a lot of people that would only think about interviewing like Andrew,
Andrew. Yeah,
but it's like for me, I love to talk to Chase or to Stu or to Jeremy, to be able to talk about their different perspectives of the band. Like Goose's episode is still number one, but I've got into this flow now with the podcast where it's like I do one for them, the people that are
mhm,
tuning in and listening, and one for myself.
yeah,
And like I kind of like I don't get caught. Like I think as a creative, you can't not like look at the numbers, but because you need to like consume that as data as far as like did
yeah,
this work and apply to the next thing, but just getting caught up in like if this thing is good based off how many people listen to it. Like I don't give a
yeah,
fuck if like 100 people listen to this podcast or 1,000 people do, like because I'm enjoying just chatting with you, and I think
yeah.
that's the thing that I hope that other people remind themselves when they're making shit.
You should talk. Maybe I'll hook you up with a couple of my friends. So my friend Mike, he played drums. He was like original member called the Reserve. He played drums. He also played drums in Seventh Star, which is another like face down band.
Right.
So he's an actor now, like comedian, like he does stuff. And then so I'm also good friends with 2 of the people that were in Thick as Blood.
Oh,
So
okay. Yeah, yeah.
so Gino the singer, he's he's like a huge act. He's like, I mean, he's a huge actor. He's on that show Mayans, the Sons of Anarchy rent like spinoff.
Oh, really? That's crazy.
He's been
Okay.
on it for it's like he's been on it since the beginning, basically.
Yeah.
And then their guitarist, I think is what Randy has been on like tons of stuff, like tons of movies, like all kinds of shit. They both are like, I mean, they're killing it. Like, and they're both like hardcore people, you know.
Hmm.
I'll see if they'll be interested in doing the podcast, but I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, and I think again, just for a little bit of self narration, is like the fact, like, for anyone that's been around since listening to like episode 5 with Cole Young, like you've seen the progression as far as like I've kind of unintentionally documented my journey in like growing this show and then like
Mhm.
getting bigger and bigger guests. And for me, I think about like the spider web of like maybe having Stanley on in 2022 somehow later along the line gets me connected to any of the Blink 182 members.
Right.
I would like, and I wouldn't write that off completely because like
Sure.
stranger things have happened on this podcast. I'm not trying to put pressure on you to be like, hey, talk to your guy to do like,
Yeah.
there's none of that. But I do think that there are certain things where it's like, oh, like I have this conversation with someone, then this other person, like I had, and I don't know how yet, but Frankie from Amir, like
Mhm.
randomly started following Scoped, and I was like, okay, and then I like DM'd him. I'm like, yo, and he was like, yo. I'm like, okay, do you want to come on the pod? And he's like, I got nothing to talk about, but hit me up in a year. And so I literally like went to my calendar and like went 1 year into the future and set a reminder.
I
So
love that.
hopefully Frankie comes on the podcast at some point. But I like, for me, it's all about like chasing curiosities
Oh, yeah.
and like I think it's the process of like showing up and like putting shit out is what is clearly what, makes other people notice and then they put you in a Blink 182 commercial.
Yeah. I look at it like the way I've always thought about it with band stuff and everything is like this is a stupid analogy, but if you're like no one wants to get on a train that's like not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But if it's like if a train is like starting to move, you're like, wait, where's that train going? Even if it's moving slow, you're like, wait, where's that train going? Like, I want to know
Mhm.
maybe I'll get on the train and see where it goes. So you're like,
Mhm.
cool, like clearly Spencer's doing this podcast, like he keeps doing it and getting guests, and it's like, oh, check it out. Like, you know what I mean? Or like, wow, that's really cool. Like, whereas opposed to like if you're sitting around and you're like, you're just telling people I want to start a podcast, and then everyone's like, of course, like, oh, what podcast, whatever. But it's like, who gives a shit if you just keep doing it, you keep doing it over and over and over again. You go to the initial bump where people are like, wow, cool. And then it's like the drop off where people are like, God, he keeps doing it. And then it's like and then you get more successful and it's like, whoa, cool. I was here the whole time. You know what I mean? Like
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
like the way that everything works.
Mhm.
So like I think, yeah, you just show up and keep doing stuff. Like, and sometimes, like you said, like things fail or like whatever. I've made so much stuff that is not that fails or whatever. You just don't, no one sees it anymore.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Like,
Like,
I don't know. I think it's about ratioing because I totally agree that there are tons of people that just like talk about this idea, but they don't execute on it. And nothing is guaranteed for people's ideas to be successful. But it's a
mhm.
matter of just like just trying. And then like the one it's almost like the thing that you least expect to work actually is the thing that like
Absolutely.
connects.
That's happened to
Um
me like so many times. I mean, when Dead Icons did a tour with Thick as Blood, which is how I met them, we had been submitting to tours like all the time and we never got anything. And then randomly out of the blue, like we got like the offer for Thick as Blood. It's like not even something that was on our radar or anything. It was like,
mhm,
oh shit, like that's wild. Like
right.
that's just yeah, stuff just when you start doing things and creating like momentum for yourself, like things start to occur. I've found.
Absolutely. Who has been the person that has seen one of your videos within the hardcore space that like still kind of boggles your mind a little bit as far as like that person's influence, scale, legend status, whatever is first to your head?
Yeah, so I'll give you all right, I'll give you two. I'll give
Sure.
you the one that's like I'll give you the person that is like the people that I'm like, oh, this is crazy. Like, and then the person that no one would expect. So like the people that are crazy, it's like your typical like I connected with like Toby Morse because I love H2O, connected with him about it, and like talking to him I was like, that's cool. And then like some like people in like a lot of my bands that I love, like I love Throwdown. I talked to like I was like DMing with their I don't know who was running their account, but like they were just saying they thought it was funny and like
Right.
whatever, like those
Throwdown's not a
bands.
band to have an Instagram person, so to
Right.
speak.
Yeah, yeah. So somebody in
Someone
the
in the
band is
band.
clearly doing that. But like that kind of stuff was like really cool to me, like as someone that like you know, was really, into that stuff.
Mhm.
And then like this is gonna sound weird, but like because I had him do a merch design for me, but uh Jonathan Buski, I think is his last name, but he played in The Promise, and he
Oh,
like
okay.
Terror and like some other bands, I believe. But like The Promise is like one of my Believers like one of my favorite hardcore records.
Hmm.
And I remember like he commented on something or whatever, and I was like, why does that name sound familiar? And I was like, oh shit, that's the guy from like The Promise. And it's like he's not like famous by any means or anything, like, but to someone that loves that record, it's like, oh, like that's crazy. And so I had him like design merch for the Dead Icons reunion show that we're doing like in November. Or actually, yeah, this is November, so like a week. So I had him design it because I was like, oh shit, that's so cool. And like
Right.
I just wanted to like connect and like work with him in some way, you know.
Hmm.
But that was cool for me. And then like I've connected with Hoya a little bit, and I've just
Hmm.
connected with some other people. Um, but it's that's cool to me. Like just
These
saying
are
like this is
these are
cool.
big name people, dude. I would not downplay that at all. I think that's very, very sick.
Yeah. Similarly to you, like when you just like messaged like Frankie from your I just like message people, like I'll be like, hey, like I really love like this album, like I love your music, like thanks
Hmm.
for liking whatever. Um yeah, and they'll like respond. Like I don't know, I just don't like it's like everyone is a person, you know what I mean? Like no matter what they've
Totally.
done, like the worst they can say is no or whatever, but like as long as I'm genuine and just saying like, hey, I really like this music, thanks for following me or whatever,
Hmm.
that's great to me. Like
Yeah.
I don't feel any like any weirdness about that or like talking to people or like hitting people up. Like I I think it's I don't know. I selfishly it's like cool just to tell someone that really makes music that you like I like what you made.
Dude, totally. I'm a firm believer in giving people your roses to them. That's
Hmm.
like gassing them up, however you want to spin it. It's like I think that goes a long way. And especially if you're like you're not owed any like DM time with any of these people. So it's like
Hmm.
I should at least spend this, the time that I know both of us are probably looking at our phones because we're having a conversation, then we should, be able to do that. Who was the person that you said was the unlikely um, person that has seen your stuff? Like that I
Um
wouldn't expect.
a guy, I'm not gonna say like who it is and like who they manage, but they manage like some of the biggest like fashion like streetwear like artists that you would know of them. Like I'm not going to say like who it is, but like because I don't want to like put the person on blast, but like
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
when they followed me and I just connected with them, I was like, holy fuck, like this person manages like people that I've gone to see like museums for like museum exhibits like multiple times, and like
Hmm.
they've done like tour like design for it's like crazy. Like I like I connected with them.
Yeah.
That was like cool for me. There's been some like pro skateboarders that I like have connected with, like yeah, a lot of people. There's probably stuff that I'm forgetting too. I don't know. Like I just like to me it like sometimes just like it's just people, and then I as I'm like talking about it, I'm like, um oh the probably one of the coolest things was was I always get the name wrong, but Travis Barker's wife like sharing the Blink-182 thing on her story.
Oh
I
yeah,
showed
yeah.
my wife, I was like, look at that. I'm on the Kardashian story.
That's so wild.
Yeah.
Um, okay, Stanley, one of the last questions before I start to wrap up. I don't know if you've ever thought about doing any of these videos in collaboration with someone who's like in the scene. So it's like your character with someone who's like in that universe. Top like three people off the top of your head that if they were like, yeah, I'm down for it, and you just want to put it into the ether, that you would love to, do some kind of skit or bit with.
Yeah, I want to do something with Hatebreed like really bad. Like I want to do something with Jamie Josta. They've been one of my favorite bands for like forever,
Hmm.
and like I want to do something with them. I'm trying to think who else. I would love to do something with like man, a band like what was it? I'm trying to remember the I don't know. Hatebreed is a big one, and then like yeah, even something like Avril Lavigne or something like that would be cool. Or like I don't know, like some shit like that would be cool. Yeah, Hatebreed or like Slayer. Yeah, I don't know. Really, the Hatebreed's the one that comes to mind.
Yeah. Yeah,
Primarily, just yeah.
I would almost think that you should. I don't know if Mr. Vogel would be down to do something where it's like guy who is like you know how there's like those characters in like movies and TV shows where it's like they just echo the main person. So
Hmm.
it's just like I don't know why this is coming to me, but it's like Vogel is telling people to stage dive. It's like, yeah, you fucking stage
Yeah,
dive.
come on, guys, come on,
Yeah,
let's go.
listen,
Woo!
listen to Scott. Do it.
Yeah,
It's like it's
I
almost like his life depends on the stage diving aspect.
yeah. I would love to do. I don't know him, like I've never met him personally, but I would love to like do something with him because I like when Terror was like one of the first bands. I mean, for everyone that
Yeah. I
like
mean,
you
like, I
listen
think
to.
Scott's down enough as like a human to like maybe entertain that. And he's been on the
Okay,
show before. So
okay.
if anyone listening who's like knows Scott, you can clip this part of the podcast and send it.
Yeah, I
Um
would love to do something where like because bands always deal with like punishers, like people just being like, "Hey, what was it like when like they like just kind of come up to you and they like corner you and like, what was it like when you recorded that album? Like was that awesome?" And they just like are so
what do
like
you
just like
expect me to say?
yeah, and you're like,
Yeah,
yes, and you're like, that's awesome. Like that, I love that. Like,
right.
and they're just like so awkward that they can't like. It's like that's a character that people have done a million times, but it's so funny. Like I don't
Right.
know.
Stanley, this has been like literally such a fun chat. Last question that I always ask every guest is a favorite Mosh related story to end on. Could be wholesome, gruesome, happened to you, you did it, or just randomly you heard it through the grapevine. However you want to spin it is how we start to end the show.
Yeah, I've got a good one. So I went to a show in Cincinnati, and it was like it was a ceremony have heart blacklisted tour that met up with Gravemaker and someone else. I swear to God I saw First Blood on that show, but a friend of mine from Cincinnati was like First Blood did not play that show. But I swear to God it's like Mandela effect. I know that they played that show. So in my mind, it was First Blood, Blacklisted, Ceremony, Have Heart, and Convicted and Grave. It's a huge show. And
Hmm.
then the first band that played was Gravemaker, and there's so many bands after that. And the first band, I'm like, I go out to Mosh or whatever. I'm like, and then like some dude just hits me and like, boing, 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 like hits me like in the nose straight up like a cartoon, and like
Right.
boom, and I just fall down on the ground. And I wake up, I'm like, what the hell happened? And like my friend like picks me up and moves me over to like this little railing. I'm sitting there and I'm like just watching bands, and I'm like, so I clearly got like like fucking bonked. Like I
You
got
got
bonked.
Looney Tuned for sure.
Yeah, like straight up like Looney Tunes cartoon like type situation. And like, and I'm sitting there watching these bands, and my friend comes back around. He's like, "Holy shit!" And he looks at me, and like my nose had swelled up like this big because of like it was just so broken and like so messed up that I looked like a cartoon, like if a bee stung a cartoon character, like. And I was like, I was in so much pain, like my nose was broken, and I
Yeah.
had to like, but I was like, I can't miss all these bands. Like I have
Yeah,
to watch all these
that's
bands.
a
Like
like that is the baconator of stacked lineups.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I stayed till the end, like broken nose, like on this railing, just like watching them. And then like I remember driving home, and like I went home, and I was like, Mom, I need to go to the ER. Like I broke my nose, and she was like, Well, you'll be fine. Just like wait until the morning. I'm like, all right. Uh,
Tough it
yeah,
out. You've already spent all night, with a broken nose. You can probably do
yeah.
another couple hours. Well, Stanley, again, super appreciative of your time. All your links to all your stuff will be in the show notes in the description. Highly recommend everyone go support him. Get some Mosh retirement merch if those are still kicking when you're listening to this. Anything you want to plug, shout out, or end, or send the people off with before we end.
Um, hmm. I don't know. I think I've shouted out most of the things that I want to do. I guess I would shout out if you're in America, check out the DSA. It's like a political organization that's like more for like like democratic socialist policies and whatnot, things that are more about community instead of like hardcore capitalism. So I like it. Maybe check it out. Yeah, that's all I would have to say.
And then you also mentioned the Dead Icons.
Yes, I should
Yes.
mention the
Yeah.
Dead Icons reunion show is in November 19th, with Suffocate Faster in Lexington. So I'm obviously going to be playing. I'm going to be there. And it'll probably sell out. So if you want to get tickets, you can find them. Like I've been posting about it and stuff. It'll be cool if you're around that area.
Yeah. Well, if my calculations are correct, I will do my darndest to make sure it's out. This episode is out, beforehand, so we can give you a little bit of a plug. Dude, I feel a selfish thing of this podcast is that I get to make all these new friends after these conversations, and I feel like I've made one. I'm a big fan of what you're doing and stoked for the future of what you're up to. And dude, I'm very stoked that you came on. We got to do this finally.
Yeah, thanks, man, for asking me. I appreciate it.